6-bolt and a 7-bolt short block that I get to showcase. Guess what? I was going to break this up into multiple videos, one for each, but the more I looked at it in the edits, the more I realized it just didn't make sense. So, you guys asked me for longer videos, and it's payback time. This one's a doozy. I'm going to go through both the 7-bolt front case that came out of my GSX and put together a 6-bolt oil pump for the engine it will be receiving. My new 6-bolt will not have balance shafts. I've laid out most of the stuff I know I'm going to use, but I may take a few toolbox trips depending on what else I decide to take apart. I need a straight edge and feeler gauges to inspect the oil pump gears, my one and only snap-on tool in my toolbox, an extruded aluminum scraper that I'm extremely proud of. I mean, damn, that's one nice scraper. Red thread locker, a long shank flathead screwdriver, Allen wrenches in case you take your 7-bolt front case plug out. They're both the same, and I only need one of these, but I grabbed both just in case. Bunch of sockets for bolts and pressing in seals, my new 18-volt cordless half-inch impact that my mom bought me for Christmas, which was greatly appreciated and I love it. Thanks, love you, Mom. My crappy Harbor Freight micrometers, the seals and gaskets I blabbered about in another video. Impact drivers are necessary if you're working on a 7-bolt front case. It keeps you from stripping the tapered head machine screw on the oil pump housing. One whack does it. Just make sure you brace it with a block of wood underneath. You see the rubber seal where the balance shaft gear used to be. The block it came off of already had a balance shaft delete performed back in 2004. Almost a decade and 48,000 miles later, wouldn't you know it, I'm installing a 6-bolt. This front case has 150,000 miles on it. It's the one that came from the block that was full of broken glass and BBs. I gave it away and the person I gave it to gave it back to me, so I guess this was meant to be. I've got the oil pump housing, I've got all the gears, got the bolts, and you can tell where these go on the front case based on their grades. This one was once a physics scholar. No, really, the grade 10 hardened bolts go on the shafts, and the grade 4s go on the pump. The aluminum pump housing doesn't see anywhere near the torque loads that the gears require and use softer bolts. If you use lesser grade bolts on a balance shaft, they'll break off while you're torquing it. Don't do that. There's nothing special about the balance shaft gear. It rides on an oil journal that's sandwiched between the gear and the shaft. If you're reusing this with balance shafts, make that oil journal part of your visual and thumbnail inspections. It's what the seal rides against to prevent oil leaks. There's the oil pump gear. Unlike the balance shaft gear, the oil journal is built into the gear. If you question it or previously had an oil leak here, replace it. There's a pair of good 6-bolt turbo balance shafts. You never know, they may come in useful someday. This is something like what you'd see after separating the front case from the block. It's dirty, gasket stuck to it, a little bit of funk from the crankcase, but it's mostly clean thanks to running only synthetic oil. Cleanup is pretty easy. You scrape the parts of the gasket off with a razor blade that don't just break off on their own, and take care not to scratch or gouge the gasket surface. It needs to be clean and flat. You don't want any of the remnants of the old gasket on the raised gasket surfaces hanging around if you're going to reuse this part. It's much easier to scrape it without damaging it if it's still oily, so save all the solvents for last. Some people soak them in gasoline or kerosene, and that works great to break up caked-on grit and grime, but if it doesn't leak and just has belt dust on it, carb cleaner and a razor blade works fine. Removing the seals with the case on the workbench is a piece of cake. Just be aware that there's an inner lip behind the seal that you could easily break off if you pry against the wrong spot. You want to be careful not to gouge the outer ring of the seal surface, but it's okay if you scratch that inner lip below it because nothing touches it. I just twist the screwdriver without inserting it all the way into the seal boss to pop one edge and then pick it out. Someone asked me in a recent video about the groove that the seal cut into my crankshaft. They wanted to know if there was a method to repair the groove. Yes, but don't mess with trying to repair the groove on the crankshaft. If you put a new seal on the engine and it's still leaking, you can actually fix it. Of course, you should use the same kind of seal and a new one to replace it, but it can be modified. The seal has a spring behind the rubber grooved lip that keeps it pressed against the oil seal journal. It's a specific length for the diameter of whatever part that fits through the seal. You can remove it, twist the seam on it, and unscrew and separate it. Then use some extremely sharp precision dikes to nip a couple of coils on it, no more than 2, and put it back together. Be careful not to bend and distort the coiled end. You should twist it 2 revolutions the opposite way before screwing it together again. The tension from twisting it should hold it together, and the result is a slightly tighter seal. Unless that groove is deep and leaks with a brand new seal, don't bother with it because it'll just wear the seal and the part faster. While you're taking the front case apart, inspect the seal surfaces as you remove them. If you break stuff or if it's already broke, the point at which you discover these problems determines how useful this part is to you and how long to spend on cleaning it up. If you discover cracks, deep gouges on sealing surfaces, or anything that doesn't look perfect on the oil pump, replace it. So with that said, here's the balance shaft plug. This is the oil seal for a 1.6 liter Mirage. They don't leak like those stupid metal freeze plugs that are never perfectly round. You can crack or distort the front case pressing the freeze plugs in. Add crankcase pressure and they always leak. JB Weld is messy. Stop it. Use the rubber plug instead of the freeze plug that comes in most balance shaft removal kits. This is where the dry shaft goes, and we'll talk about why I call it that later. It doesn't touch anything in the front case except for the oil seal. Don't lose track of the cylindrical seal journal that bolts between the gear and the shaft. If you're reusing the balance shafts and the oil seal groove is too deep, you can just flip it over and use the other side where there's no groove as long as it's not pitted or rusty. But I don't need any of this stuff. I'm just playing around here. Let's see what this oil pump looks like. I've already removed the tapered screw, but there's no gasket between the gear housing. Nothing. You don't want it there, and I'll explain this during assembly. You shouldn't need anything to pry it loose, but if you do, go for the edges that don't have milled surfaces. It's just 2 dowel pins aligning it to the front case and it should come apart easily. Both gears need to come out for a full inspection. To take the drive gear out, one 14mm nut holds it on. If you were smart, you broke this nut loose prior to removing the timing belt. Check the oiled bearing surfaces thoroughly and look for damaged gears or scoring on the oil pump housing. The oil pump drive gear has a pair of oil holes inside an oil groove that receive their oil supply from the rear oil pump housing